What if I told you that right now, in an upscale neighborhood in America, a security camera is recording something that will make your blood run cold? Not a break-in, not an accident, but a millionaire venture capitalist forcing his 7 months pregnant wife to kneel on concrete in a torrential storm for 3 hours straight. This isn't fiction. This happened. And what's more terrifying, the police came, saw everything, and left her there. Because sometimes the most dangerous prisons don't have bars, they have marriage certificates. Rachel Winters thought she'd married her Prince Charming. Stanford MBA, successful career, the American dream wrapped in a wedding ring. But behind the Tesla in the driveway, in the venture capital success story, was a man who had done this before, 3 times before. And those women? One supposedly committed suicide. Another is still in a psychiatric facility. The third vanished without a trace. But Rachel did something none of them could. She died, at least that's what her husband believed. And from that death came a resurrection that would bring Ryan not just one man, but an entire network of predators hiding in plain sight. Over the next hour, you're going to hear how one woman went from kneeling in the rain, stripped of everything, to standing in a courtroom watching her abuser get 45 years to life. You'll discover the underground network that tried to save her, the betrayal that nearly destroyed her, and the evidence hidden in a psychiatric facility's basement that changed everything. But here's what will really haunt you. This system, this playbook that David Winters used, it's being used right now, today, in 12 states that we know of. The woman in your office who always wears long sleeves, your neighbor who suddenly stopped coming to book club, that college friend who posts perfect family photos but never answers your calls. 1 in 4 women will experience severe intimate partner violence. This story isn't just about Rachel. It might be about someone you know. So if this story moves you, if it makes you angry, if it opens your eyes, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to hear that a survival is possible. Hit that subscribe button because we tell stories that matter, stories that could save lives. And if you're watching this somewhere safe, take a second to leave a comment, even just a heart emoji, because every interaction helps this reach someone who might be looking for a sign that escape is possible. This is The Rain That Night, Rachel's story, maybe your story, definitely our story, because silence is what lets predators win, and we're done being silent. Let's begin. The security camera captured everything. Rachel Winters knelt on the cold concrete of her driveway, 7 months pregnant, rain streaming down her face. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. Her husband David stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. The neighbor's Ring cameras would later show he stood there for 3 hours. But that night was still weeks away. Tonight, Rachel stood in their Pacific Heights mansion, staring at the Apple Watch notification that would change everything. Chase Sapphire charge, $842 at the St. Regis, San Francisco. David was supposedly at a tech conference in Seattle. Rachel's hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. She checked their shared calendar. David's conference keynote was scheduled for 9 p.m. Pacific time. Right now, her phone buzzed. David sending a selfie from what appeared to be a conference hall, but Rachel recognized the marble pattern behind him. She had been to the St. Regis bar for her friend's birthday last month. That exact marble was in their lobby. "How's the presentation going?" she texted back, her hands trembling. "Crushing it, babe. Room loves the sustainability initiative pitch." Rachel screenshot everything. Then she did something she had never done before. She opened his laptop, still logged into his email. The conference had been canceled 2 weeks ago. David had known. He had been pretending to travel for work at least 6 times in the past 3 months. The front door opened downstairs. David's voice carried up, talking on his phone. "No, Claire, I told you not to call this number. I'm handling it." Claire, Rachel knew that name. Claire Davidson, the 26-year-old junior partner at David's firm. The one he always said was too ambitious for her own good. Rachel sat on their bed waiting. David appeared in the doorway, his usual confident smile in place. His dark hair was slightly messed. His collar had a tiny smudge of pink, not her lipstick shade. "Hey, babe," he said, loosening his tie. Long day at the conference. The red-eye back was brutal. How was Seattle? Rachel asked, her voice steady. Cold, rainy, typical Seattle. He walked over, bent to kiss her forehead. He smelled like unfamiliar perfume. David, Rachel said quietly. I know. His body went rigid. Know what? The conference was canceled 2 weeks ago. You were at the St. Regis tonight, with Claire. The transformation was instant. David's charming mask slipped, revealing something cold underneath. He straightened, his 6'2" frame towering over her seated position. You went through my email? His voice was dangerously quiet. You lied to me, multiple times, while I'm carrying your child. David laughed, but there was no warmth in it. My child? You got pregnant on purpose, Rachel. Don't pretend this was some mutual decision. We discussed starting a family. No, you discussed it. You decided. Just like you decided to snoop through my private communications. He grabbed his laptop, checking the screen. You screenshot my emails? My messages? Rachel stood, her pregnancy making the movement awkward. I'm your wife. I have a right to know if you're having an affair. You have no rights, David said, his voice sharp as glass. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I see Claire. You know why? Because she doesn't treat me like a walking bank account. She has her own ambitions, her own career. What do you have, Rachel? What do you contribute? The words hit Rachel like physical blows. I gave up my career for you. You asked me to. I asked you to take a break, not become a permanent housewife. Rachel felt tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. I want you to leave. David stepped closer. This is my house, bought with my money. You leave. David, please, I'm 7 months pregnant. Not my problem. He pulled out his phone. In fact, let's make this official. The investor dinner was scheduled for the following Friday. David had insisted Rachel attend, despite the growing tension between them. 30 of Silicon Valley's most influential venture capitalists would be there. David needed to close a $40 million funding round. Rachel had moved into the guest room, but David made it clear she would play the perfect wife at this dinner, or he would make their separation very public and very ugly. She wore the black cocktail dress he selected, the one that carefully concealed her pregnancy. David wanted her visible but not too visible, present but not prominent. The dinner was at their house. Caterers filled the space with elegant appetizers. Rachel stood by David's side as he charmed investors, his hand possessively on her lower back whenever anyone looked their way. And this is my beautiful wife, Rachel, David said to Thomas Harrison, managing partner at Pacific Ventures. Stanford MBA, but she's taking time to focus on our growing family. Congratulations, Thomas said warmly. When are you due? 2 months, Rachel replied. How exciting. David, you must be thrilled. David's grip tightened on her back. Absolutely. Though Rachel's been having some challenges, hormones, The doctors are monitoring her closely. Rachel stiffened. There were no doctors, no challenges except the ones David created. Claire arrived halfway through dinner, her entrance deliberately timed. She wore a red dress that turned every head in the room. David's eyes tracked her movement as she found her seat at the far end of the table. Rachel excused herself to the bathroom, needing space to breathe. When she returned, she heard David's voice from his study. I told you to wait until after the funding closed. No, Claire, she won't be a problem. Trust me, I know how to handle Rachel. Rachel's hands shook. She pulled out her phone, started recording. The prenup was airtight. She gets nothing. Yes, even with the baby. Especially with the baby. I've been documenting her instability for months. The psychiatrist is a friend from college. He'll write whatever I need. The door opened. David saw her immediately. I have to go, he told Claire, hanging up. His face was stone. Enjoying the show? You're planning to take my baby? Rachel's voice cracked. Our guests are waiting. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in, hard enough to bruise. You're going to go out there, smile, and be the perfect wife, or I'll tell everyone you're having a mental breakdown. Who do you think they'll believe, the successful venture capitalist or the hormonal pregnant woman? Rachel yanked her arm free. I recorded everything. David pulled out his own phone, showed her a video. It was her, but distorted somehow. In it, She appeared to be screaming at David, throwing objects. She had never done that. Deepfake technology, David said casually. My startup's developing it. Incredible what we can create these days. I have 6 more videos like this. Different dates, different incidents that never happen. But they look real, don't they? Rachel felt the floor tilt beneath her. You can't do this. I can do whatever I want. Now get back to our guest before I call 911 and report that you're having a psychotic episode. She stumbled back to the dinner, her mind reeling. David returned moments later, all smiles and charm. The evening continued its charade until Rachel couldn't bear it anymore. As David laughed at someone's joke, she stood abruptly. I need air, she announced to the table. David's jaw clenched. Rachel, you should rest. I said I need air. She walked toward the French doors leading to the patio. David followed. Sit down. No. The investors watched with growing discomfort as David grabbed Rachel's wrist. She pulled away and in the struggle, knocked over a glass of wine. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. I'm so sorry, David announced to the room, his voice full of false concern. Rachel's been having episodes. The pregnancy has been very difficult for her mental health. I'm not having episodes, Rachel said loudly. Tell them the truth, David. Tell them about Claire. Tell them what you're planning. The room went silent. Claire's face was pale. Thomas Harrison cleared his throat uncomfortably. David's mask finally cracked completely. Everyone, please excuse us. He gripped Rachel's arm. You need to cool off. He dragged her outside into the beginning of a rainstorm. The patio was dark. The investors couldn't see clearly through the rain-streaked glass. Kneel, David commanded. What? David, I'm pregnant. Kneel or I call the police right now and have you committed. I have all the documentation ready. Psychiatrist reports, video evidence, witness testimony from tonight. You'll give birth in a mental facility, and you'll never see the baby. Rachel's legs shook. Rain was falling harder now, soaking through her dress. She could see the investors inside, some trying to peer out, others deliberately looking away. Slowly, Rachel lowered herself to her knees on the cold concrete. The rain intensified as Rachel knelt on the concrete. Her dress was soaked through within minutes, the cold penetrating to her bones. Through the French doors, she could see the investors gathering their coats, making excuses to leave. The dinner was ruined, but David didn't seem to care anymore. He stood over her, rain running down his face, his expression unreadable. You did this to yourself, he said. All you had to do was play along. David, please, Rachel gasped, her teeth chattering. The baby? The baby you trapped me with? The baby you thought would keep me locked in this marriage? He laughed bitterly. That baby is the only reason I haven't divorced you already. Can't have a custody battle before the child is born, can I? A car pulled up to their driveway. Through the rain, Rachel saw Maya Rodriguez, her best friend from Stanford. Maya had seen Rachel's desperate text sent from the bathroom. Help! David's lost it. Please come. Maya rushed out of her car, her attorney instincts kicking in immediately. What the hell is going on here? This is private property, David said calmly. You need to leave. Rachel is 7 months pregnant and kneeling in a storm. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. David pulled out his phone, showing Maya a screen. I'll show them the security footage of Rachel attacking at me. I'll show them the psychiatrist reports documenting her declining mental state. I'll show them how she embarrassed herself in front of 30 witnesses tonight. Maya knelt beside Rachel, trying to help her up. Come on, honey, we're leaving. David stepped between them in the cars. She's not going anywhere. Rachel is my wife. This is our home. Unless you want to be arrested for trespassing and kidnapping, I suggest you leave. You can't keep her here against her will, Maya said. I'm not keeping her. Rachel, do you want to leave? Rachel looked at Maya, then at David. She knew what would happen if she left. David would use every resource, every connection, every dirty trick to destroy her. He would take the baby. He had the money, the lawyers, the fabricated evidence. I need to stay, Rachel whispered. Maya's eyes widened. Rachel, no. Please go, Rachel said, hating herself for the words. I'm okay. Maya stood slowly, rain streaming down her face. I'm calling the police anyway. She did. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. David met them at the door, calm and composed. He had changed into dry clothes, looking every inch the concerned husband. "Officers, thank you for coming. My wife has been having severe prenatal psychosis. Her psychiatrist, Dr. James Morrison, has been treating her for months." He showed them official-looking documents on his tablet. "Tonight she had an episode during a business dinner. She's calmed down now, but she insisted on sitting outside. I've been trying to convince her to come in." The officers looked at Rachel, still kneeling in the rain. One of them, Officer Bradley, approached her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Rachel looked up at him, seeing genuine concern in his eyes. But she also saw David behind him holding his phone, ready to play those deep-fake videos. I'm fine," she managed. "Why don't you come inside? You'll catch pneumonia out here." "She does this when she's having an episode," David interjected smoothly. "Dr. Morrison says it's a form of self-punishment, part of her condition." Officer Bradley frowned. "Ma'am, is someone making you stay out here?" This was her chance. Rachel opened her mouth, then saw David's screen. He had pulled up a video ready to show the police. In it, she appeared to be wielding a knife, threatening him. It was completely fake, but it looked terrifyingly real. "No," Rachel said quietly. "No one's making me do anything." The second officer, Officer Martinez, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, regardless of any medical condition, she needs to get inside. She's pregnant." "I agree completely," David said. "Rachel, honey, please come inside. The officers are right. It was a performance, and everyone knew it. But David had set the stage too well. The documents, the witnesses from dinner who had seen Rachel's outburst, the calm, reasonable way he spoke, it all painted a picture of a devoted husband dealing with a mentally ill wife. The officers left after David promised to get Rachel inside and contact her psychiatrist in the morning. Maya, who had been waiting in her car, tried one more time. "Rachel, please, just get in my car. We'll figure out the rest later." But David was already guiding Rachel toward the house, his hand firm on her arm. "Thank you for your concern, Maya. We'll handle this as a family." Inside, David released her immediately. "Change into dry clothes. You're dripping on the hardwood." Rachel stumbled to the guest room, her body shaking uncontrollably. She peeled off the soaked dress, wrapped herself in a towel, and collapsed on the bed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "I'm not giving up on you." But David appeared in the doorway, hand extended. "Your phone." "David, your phone, or I call Dr. Morrison right now and have you admitted for 72-hour psychiatric hold." Rachel handed over her phone. David pocketed it and left, locking the door from the outside. She was alone, cold, and terrified. The baby kicked frantically, responding to her stress. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her belly. "I'm so sorry." Outside, the storm raged on, but it was nothing compared to the storm building inside that house. 2 weeks passed in a twisted routine. David unlocked Rachel's door each morning, allowing her supervised access to the kitchen and bathroom. He had hired a nurse, really a guard, named Brenda, who watched her every move. David told anyone who asked that Rachel was on bed rest due to pregnancy complications. Then, unexpectedly, everything changed. David came home one evening with flowers. Not just any flowers, yellow roses, the same ones he'd brought on their first date. He dismissed Brenda for the night and unlocked Rachel's door permanently. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Maybe I've been too harsh. The stress isn't good for you or the baby." Rachel stayed silent, wary. "I've asked Claire to transfer to our New York office," David continued. "It's over between us. You were right. I was being selfish." He seemed genuine. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, appeared warm, remorseful even. "I made an appointment with a real counselor," he said, "for both of us. Couples therapy. Would you consider it?" Rachel wanted to believe him. Despite everything, part of her remembered the man she'd fallen in love with. The David who had charmed her at Stanford, who had promised her the world. "Okay," she whispered. Over the next few days, David transformed back into the man she remembered. He cooked dinner, asked about the baby, even assembled the crib they'd bought months ago. He gave her phone back, though she noticed it had been factory reset. Maya was suspicious when Rachel called her. "This is classic abuse cycle, Rach. He's love-bombing you." "Maybe he really wants to change," Rachel said, watching David through the window as he planted new flowers in their garden. "Men like David don't change. They just get better at manipulation." But Rachel wanted to hope, needed to hope, for the baby's sake. The couple's therapy session was scheduled for Thursday. Dr. Patricia Kendall seemed competent, asking probing questions about their relationship dynamics. David admitted to his affair, even seemed to show genuine remorse. I lost sight of what mattered, he told the therapist. My ego, my career, it all became more important than my family. That night, David suggested they renew their vows after the baby was born. A fresh start, he said. Rachel felt herself relaxing for the first time in months. Maybe they could salvage this. Maybe their child could have a normal family. Then, Monday morning, she woke to find David gone and a legal document on the kitchen counter. It was a post-nuptial agreement. The terms were devastating. If they divorced, Rachel would receive a one-time payment of $50,000. No alimony, no share of assets. And most crucially, David would have primary custody of any children. Sign it, David said, appearing in the doorway, or get out now with nothing. But the therapy, you said, David laughed. Dr. Kendall? She's an actress. $800 for 3 hours of work. You really thought I'd changed? The flowers, the crib, the apologies, all of it had been an act, a setup to make her lower her guard. The choice is simple, David continued. Sign the document and stay. You'll live comfortably, see your child on weekends, or leave now with nothing and try to fight me in court. With your documented mental health issues and no money for lawyers, how do you think that will go? Rachel's hands shook as she read the document. It was even worse than she'd thought. There was a clause stating she admitted to mental instability during pregnancy, another acknowledging David as the primary stable parent. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She called Maya from the bathroom, whispering the situation. Don't sign anything, Maya urged. I'll help you find a pro bono lawyer. He has those fake videos, Maya. He has a fake psychiatrist ready to testify. He has unlimited resources. Then we get creative, Maya said. Pack a bag. Tomorrow when he leaves for work, you run. Come to my place. Rachel agreed. She quietly packed essentials, hid the bag in the laundry room. When morning came, she told David she needed one more day to decide. He agreed, confident in his victory. As soon as his Tesla pulled out of the driveway, Rachel grabbed her bag. But when she tried to leave, she found all the doors locked from the outside. Electronic locks, controlled by David's phone. The windows were locked too, reinforced with security bars David had installed for safety. She was trapped. Her phone rang. David. Going somewhere, he asked. The house system alerts me to any unusual activity. Brenda will be there in 10 minutes to keep you company. Rachel sank to the floor, her escape plans shattered. The walls felt like they were closing in. The baby kicked, a reminder of what was at stake. Brenda arrived as promised, but she wasn't alone. A woman Rachel didn't recognize stood beside her, mid-40s, professional blazer, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. This is Sarah Mitchell, Brenda announced. She's a social worker. Mr. Winters requested a wellness check. Rachel's heart sank. Another one of David's manipulations. But when Brenda stepped into the kitchen to make coffee, Sarah moved closer to Rachel and whispered quickly, Maya sent me. Play along. Rachel's eyes widened. Sarah gave an imperceptible nod, then raised her voice to normal volume. Mrs. Winters, I'd like to ask you some routine questions about your pregnancy and home situation. For the next hour, Sarah conducted what appeared to be a standard interview while Brenda watched from the doorway. But Sarah's questions were carefully coded, her notepad positioned so only Rachel could see her real notes. Network can help. Need 2 weeks to arrange. Can you survive that long? Rachel responded to the verbal questions while nodding slightly to the written ones. Before leaving, Sarah handed Rachel a business card. Call if you need anything, day or night. The card looked official, but Rachel noticed tiny numbers written in pen on the back, a different phone number. That night, while Brenda dozed in front of the TV, Rachel called the number from the bathroom. You're not the first woman David has done this to. Sarah's voice was urgent. We've been tracking him for 3 years. You're the 4th wife. What happened to the others? One committed suicide, or that's what the report said. Another is in a psychiatric facility. The third disappeared completely. Her family still looks for her. Rachel's blood ran cold. Who are you really? Detective Sarah Mitchell, specializing in domestic violence cases. But David has connections throughout the police force. I've been working unofficially with a network of survivors and advocates. We call it the Underground. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah visited 3 more times under the pretense of social work. Each time she brought hidden tools, a burner phone tucked in a vitamin bottle, cash hidden in a package of diapers, contact information sewn into baby clothes. The network was extensive. There was Catherine, a tech executive who had escaped her own abusive marriage and now helped women disappear digitally. Marcus, a former FBI agent who knew how to create new identities. Dr. Lisa Chen, not her real name, who provided medical care off the books. The plan is simple, Sarah explained during her final visit. Next Thursday, David has a board meeting in San Jose. It's scheduled for 4 hours. Brenda takes a lunch break at 12:30. That's your window. He'll track my phone, my credit cards. Leave them all. Catherine has created a digital ghost for you to step into. New identity, new history, completely untraceable. Rachel wanted to believe it could work. But that Wednesday night, David came home with news that shattered everything. "Good news, honey," he said with false cheer. "Dr. Morrison has agreed to induce labor next week. Better to have the baby early, given your mental state. Safer for everyone." "That's dangerous. I'm only 8 months." "Dr. Morrison says it's fine. And once the baby's here, you can get the help you really need. There's a wonderful facility in Nevada, very discreet. You'll be admitted immediately after delivery." Rachel understood. David planned to take the baby and have her committed, just as he'd done to his previous wives. "When?" she managed to ask. "Monday morning." Thursday's escape plan would be too late. She texted Sarah from the burner phone. He moved timeline, inducing Monday. The response was immediate. "Tomorrow, noon, be ready." But the next morning, David didn't leave for work. "Called in sick," he announced. "Want to spend time with you before the big day." Rachel's heart pounded. The escape was impossible with David home. Then, at 11:45, Claire called David's phone. "I told you not to call," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. After a pause, his expression changed. "What do you mean, emergency board meeting?" "Now, though." Rachel heard Claire's panicked voice through the phone. Something about investors threatening to pull out, needing David there immediately. David cursed, grabbed his keys. "Don't try anything stupid," he warned Rachel. "Brenda, watch her carefully." As his car pulled away, Rachel counted to 60. Then Brenda's phone rang. Sarah's voice disguised. "This is Valley Medical. Your mother's been in an accident. She's asking for you." Brenda went pale. "My mother? Is she okay?" "You need to come now." Brenda looked at Rachel, torn. "I can't leave." "Go," Rachel said. "I'm 8 months pregnant." "Where would I go?" Brenda hesitated, then grabbed her keys. "Don't move. Don't answer the door. I'll be back in an hour." The moment Brenda's car disappeared, a van pulled up. Sarah jumped out with 2 other women. "We have maybe 20 minutes before David realizes the board meeting is fake." "Move." They grabbed Rachel's prepared bag, helped her into the van. As they pulled away, Rachel saw her prison of a house getting smaller in the rear window. "Where are we going?" "First a medical check, then a safe house out of state. After the baby's born, we'll work on permanent relocation." For the first time in months, Rachel felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Then Sarah's police radio crackled. David's voice talking to dispatch. "My pregnant wife is missing. She's mentally unstable, dangerous to herself. Issue an Amber Alert immediately." The net was closing already. The van pulled into an abandoned warehouse in Oakland. Sarah quickly ushered Rachel inside where a makeshift medical station waited. Dr. Lisa Chen, the network's underground physician, immediately began examining Rachel. "Blood pressure's high but manageable," she said. "Baby's heartbeat is strong. You're okay to travel, but we need to move fast." Catherine, the tech expert, handed Rachel a new driver's license. "Jennifer Martinez, 29, originally from Phoenix. Your digital footprint goes back 15 years. "How is that possible?" "I bought a deceased person's identity from before digital records were universal. Built it up slowly. It's completely legitimate as far as any system can tell." Sarah's radio continued crackling with updates. David had convinced the police that Rachel was suffering from prenatal psychosis, that she might harm herself or the baby. Every cop in the Bay Area was looking for her. "We need to get you out of California," Sarah said. "There's a safe house in Portland. 9-hour drive, but flying is too risky." They transferred Rachel to a different vehicle, a minivan with Oregon plates, driven by a woman named Rosa, who looked like everyone's grandmother. "I've done this run 30 times, Rosa said calmly. "Never lost a passenger." As they drove north on Interstate 5, Rachel watched the news on Rosa's phone. David was on every local channel, the grieving husband pleading for his wife's safe return. "She's not well," he told reporters, tears in his eyes. "She needs medical attention. If anyone sees her, please call authorities immediately." He'd posted a $50,000 reward. They stopped only once at a rest stop near Reading. Rachel wore a wig, sunglasses, and padding that made her look heavier. Still, when a highway patrol car pulled in, her heart nearly stopped. The officer looked directly at their van, started walking over. "Stay calm," Rosa whispered. "You're my daughter. We're visiting colleges for your teenage son." The officer knocked on the window. "Afternoon, ladies. Where you headed?" "Portland State," Rosa replied cheerfully. "My daughter's boy is looking at engineering programs." The officer glanced at Rachel. She forced herself to smile, placing a hand on her belly, hoping to get the tour done before this one arrives. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Drive safe. Weather's getting rough up north." As he walked away, Rachel realized she'd been holding her breath for 30 seconds. They reached the Oregon border as sunset painted the sky orange. Rachel felt a moment of relief, out of California, beyond David's immediate reach. Then Rosa's phone rang. Sarah's voice was tense. "Problem. David hired private investigators. Black SUV about 2 miles behind you." Rachel turned. Through the rear window, she could see the vehicle. "Take the next exit," Sarah instructed. "There's a truck stop. Bathroom window leads to a drainage area. Another car's waiting." Rosa pulled into the crowded truck stop. "Go. Now." Rachel moved as quickly as her pregnant body allowed. Inside the bathroom, a woman in a baseball cap waited. "Through here," she said, helping Rachel through a surprisingly wide window. They dropped into a concrete drainage channel where another woman waited with an ATV. The ride was bumpy, terrifying, lasting 10 minutes through dark woods. They emerged at a different rest area where yet another car waited, this time with Washington plates. "David's investigators are still at the truck stop," the new driver Marcus informed her. "They're searching at every vehicle leaving." They drove through the night, avoiding highways, taking back roads through small Oregon towns. Rachel dozed fitfully, waking to contractions that she prayed were just Braxton Hicks. By dawn, they reached the safe house, a farmhouse outside Portland, surrounded by acres of Christmas trees. "You'll be safe here," Sarah promised, arriving an hour later. "The property is owned by a shell company. No connection to you or the network." Rachel collapsed onto a bed, exhaustion overwhelming her. But she couldn't sleep. Every car engine made her heart race. Every unfamiliar voice sent panic through her body. That evening, Sarah brought disturbing news. "David's escalating. He's hired a team of cyber experts to track our network. He's also filed federal kidnapping charges, claiming we're a trafficking ring." Can he do that? With enough money and connections, he can do almost anything. Rachel felt the walls closing in again. Even here, hundreds of miles away, David's reach seemed infinite. Then Catherine arrived with worse news. "He found something. One of our safe houses in Sacramento was raided an hour ago. They arrested 2 network members." "He's going to find me," Rachel whispered. "Not if we move first," Sarah said. "There's a boat leaving Seattle tomorrow night. Canada doesn't have the same extradition agreements for parental kidnapping. You could start fresh there." Rachel nodded. One more run, one more chance at freedom. But as she packed that night, she felt the first real contraction. Not practice, not false labor. The baby was coming. The contractions came in waves, each one stronger than the last. Dr. Chen arrived within an hour, her medical bag in hand. "You're in early labor," she confirmed after examining Rachel. "We have maybe 12 hours. "We need to get her to a hospital," Sarah insisted. "Too dangerous," Chen replied. "Every hospital in 3 states has her photo." David made sure of that. "I can deliver here if necessary," Chen said. but it's risky without proper equipment. Sarah made rapid phone calls. There's a midwifery clinic in Hood River. Off the grid, they don't ask questions. 2-hour drive. As they prepared to leave, a new woman arrived. Tall, confident, with sharp green eyes and professional bearing. This is Alexandra, Sarah introduced. She runs the northern route to Canada. She'll get you across the border after delivery. Alexandra studied Rachel with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. We'll take my vehicle. Medical transport van won't raise suspicions. They loaded Rachel into the van, Dr. Chen beside her. Sarah wanted to come, but Alexandra refused. Too many people draws attention, just the patient and doctor. Something felt wrong, but another contraction hit, and Rachel couldn't focus on the feeling. The drive through the Columbia River Gorge should have been beautiful, but Rachel only saw it through a haze of pain. Dr. Chen monitored her constantly, offering reassurance. You're doing great. Baby's heart rate is perfect. Alexandra drove in silence, occasionally checking her phone at red lights. After an hour, she pulled into a rest stop. Bathroom break, she announced. Though she hadn't been drinking anything, she was gone for 10 minutes. When she returned, her demeanor had changed, lighter, almost cheerful. Change of plans, Alexandra said. The clinic had an emergency, but there's a better equipped facility just across the Washington border. Dr. Chen frowned. Sarah didn't mention. Sarah doesn't know everything, Alexandra cut her off. They drove north, but instead of toward Washington, Alexandra turned east toward Mount Hood. The roads became narrower, more isolated. This isn't the way, Dr. Chen said sharply. Shortcut, Alexandra replied. Then Rachel saw it in the rearview mirror. Alexandra was smiling. Stop the van, Dr. Chen demanded. Alexandra laughed. David pays well. $300,000 to deliver you both. Rachel's blood went ice cold. You're working for him? For 2 years, every woman who thought she escaped, I delivered them right back. You're number 4. Dr. Chen lunged for the wheel, but Alexandra backhanded her, sending the smaller woman sprawling. The van swerved but stayed on the road. He's waiting at a private medical facility, Alexandra continued conversationally. You'll deliver there. Sign custody papers while you're still drugged. Then off to Nevada for your permanent vacation. The network, Sarah, will think you're in Canada. By the time they figure it out, you'll be diagnosed as delusional, claiming conspiracy theories about networks and trafficking. Who'll believe the crazy woman in the psych ward? Rachel's contractions were 5 minutes apart now. The baby was coming whether she wanted it or not. Please, she begged, whatever he's paying. It's not just money, Alexandra said. David has evidence of my real crimes, things that would put me away for life. This is my get-out-of-jail-free card. They pulled up to a modern medical building, all glass and steel, completely isolated in the forest. David's Tesla was parked outside. He emerged looking exactly as he always did, controlled, confident, victorious. Hello, darling, he said as Alexandra opened the van door. Let's go have our baby. No, Rachel tried to resist, but another contraction doubled her over. David and Alexandra carried her inside where a medical team waited. Real doctors, real nurses, but all on David's payroll. Epidural immediately, David instructed. She needs to be calm for delivery. No drugs, Rachel screamed. Please, I want to be conscious. But they held her down, slid the needle into her spine. Within minutes, numbness spread through her lower body, along with a fuzzy calm she fought against. David sat beside her, stroking her hair with mock tenderness. This is what's best, Rachel. You'll see. Our son will have everything, the best schools, opportunities, a stable home, and you'll get the help you need. Through the medication haze, Rachel heard Dr. Chen somewhere in the room, arguing with someone. Then silence. Chen was gone. Where? Rachel tried to ask. Your friend had to leave, David said smoothly. But don't worry, these are the best doctors money can buy. The labor progressed quickly. Rachel fought to stay alert, to remember every detail for the lawsuit she'd never be able to file. She heard them discussing legal documents, David signing something with a notary present. Then through the signing, she heard the most beautiful sound, her baby's first cry. It's a boy, someone announced. Rachel reached for him, but her arms were strapped down. Let me hold him. After you sign, David said, producing documents. Voluntary surrender of custody. Sign and you can hold him. Never, David sighed. Sedate her fully. We'll use the unconscious consent protocol. As the medication pushed her toward darkness, Rachel heard her son crying, saw David holding him, and felt her heart shatter. The last thing she heard was Alexandra. Transport to Nevada is ready. Then nothing. Rachel woke in a stark white room with no windows. Her body ached, her arms empty. The baby, her son, was gone. A nurse entered, checking vitals with mechanical efficiency. You're at Mountain View Psychiatric Facility, Nevada. You've been admitted for postpartum psychosis. I want to leave. You're on a 72-hour hold. Dr. Morrison will evaluate you tomorrow. Dr. Morrison, David's college friend, the fake psychiatrist, was now real, with real power over her freedom. For 2 days, Rachel played their game. Took the medications they claimed were vitamins but made her drowsy. Attended group therapy where she said nothing, ate the bland food and stared at painted walls. On the third day, something unexpected happened. During lunch, a woman sat beside her, mid-50s, graying hair, familiar eyes. You're Rachel, the woman said quietly, David's new wife. Rachel studied her carefully. Who are you? Patricia, David's second wife. I've been here 3 years. Rachel's breath caught. You're alive? Barely. The medications, the treatments, they break you down, make you forget who you were. Patricia's hands shook. But I remember everything. I've been waiting. For what? For someone strong enough to fight back. Someone who still has people looking for them. Patricia slipped a small phone into Rachel's pocket. Hidden in the ventilation system. Call your people. Tell them about the basement. What basement? Where they keep the records, the real ones. David's payments to Morrison, to the staff, to judges. 3 wives' worth of evidence. That night, Rachel called Sarah from the bathroom, whispering urgently. The call lasted 30 seconds before guards burst in, but it was enough. We know where you are, Sarah had said. Hold on. The next morning, Dr. Morrison increased her medications, suspicious of her sudden alertness. But Patricia created a distraction, a violent outburst that drew all staff attention. In the chaos, Rachel found the basement door Patricia had described. Using a keycard Patricia had stolen months ago, she entered. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Years of documentation, not just about her, but about Patricia, about Linda, the first wife who had supposedly committed suicide, about Claire, who it turned out had been David's accomplice for years, helping him identify wealthy, vulnerable women to marry. Rachel used the hidden phone to photograph everything, uploading to a cloud account Catherine had created. Page after page of evidence. Bank transfers, forged medical documents, correspondence between David and Morrison planning her commitment before she'd even given birth. Then she found the video files. David, drunk at what looked like a bachelor party, bragging about his system. Marry them, get them pregnant, take the kid and the money. They're all so desperate for love, they never see it coming. The final folder made her stomach turn. Photos of her son, already enrolled in a boarding school in Switzerland under a different name. David was erasing her completely. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Rachel uploaded the last files, deleted the phone's history, and slipped back upstairs just as guards noticed her missing. Attempted escape, Morrison noted in her file. Increased security. Prepare for long-term commitment. But 3 days later, everything changed. During morning medication, alarms suddenly blared. Not fire alarms, police sirens. Federal agents flooded the facility, badges reading FBI. Agent Sarah Mitchell, her real badge now displayed, entered Rachel's room. We got it all. Every document you uploaded. David's been arrested, along with Morrison, Alexandra, and 14 others. My son? Safe, in protective custody. A real judge reviewed the case. Sarah helped Rachel stand. You're free. As they walked out, Rachel saw Patricia being released too, tears streaming down her face. Other women emerged from rooms, blinking in confusion as their years-long nightmares ended. In the parking lot, news vans waited. David's arrest was being live-streamed. He stood in handcuffs outside his Palo Alto office, investors and employees watching in shock as agents read the charges. Kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment. Claire was arrested at the airport, trying to flee to Mexico with suitcases of cash. Alexandra was caught at the Canadian border with another woman in her van. David's fifth wife attempt, saved just in time. But the moment that broke the internet came when Rachel stepped out of the facility. A reporter thrust a microphone at her. "Any words for your husband?" Rachel looked directly at the camera, knowing David would see this from his jail cell. "I'm not your victim anymore. None of us are." The video went viral within hours. Other women came forward, ex-girlfriends, employees, anyone David had terrorized into silence. The trial would take months, but the verdict was certain. That night, in a real hospital room with legal authority, Rachel finally held her son. He was perfect, tiny fingers wrapping around hers. Maya sat beside her, tears flowing freely. "You did it. You actually did it." "We all did," Rachel corrected, thinking of Patricia, Linda's family who'd never stopped investigating. Sarah, who'd risked her career, the network that had tried so hard to save her. The trial began 6 months later. Rachel sat in the witness stand, her son now crawling and babbling, watched by Maya in the gallery. David sat at the defendant's table, his confident veneer finally cracked. Orange didn't suit him. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "Rachel Winters, though I'm taking back my maiden name, Chen." David's lawyer objected immediately. "Your Honor, Ms. Chen is clearly overruled." Judge Martha Stevens cut him off. This wasn't Judge Hamilton, who'd been removed from the bench for taking bribes. This was a judge with 30 years of experience and no patience for manipulation. Rachel testified for 3 days, walking through every detail. The fake psychiatric reports, the enforced kneeling in the rain, the stolen baby. The defense tried to paint her as unstable, but she had receipts for everything. Videos, documents, recordings Rachel didn't even know existed from David's own security system that Catherine had hacked. Patricia testified next, her voice stronger than it had been in years. Then came the family of Linda Morrison, not related to the corrupt doctor, who presented evidence that her suicide had been staged. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. "Please state your name." "Claire Davidson." She had flipped, accepting a plea deal for full cooperation. Her testimony was devastating. "David planned everything from the beginning," she said, avoiding his burning stare. He'd researched women, smart but isolated, recently lost a parent or went through trauma. Vulnerable. He kept files on potential targets. She produced the files. Dozens of women, their personal information cataloged like items in a store. Rachel's file went back 2 years before they'd even met. He'd engineered their meeting at a Stanford alumni event. "What about the babies?" the prosecutor asked. "He wanted heirs he could control completely. Raise them without maternal influence. He talked about creating perfect successors to his empire." The prosecutor presented financial records. David had stolen over $20 million through his marriages, funneling it through offshore accounts. But he'd been sloppy. Catherine's digital forensics had traced every penny. Dr. Morrison took a plea deal too, losing his medical license and serving 5 years. He revealed that David had paid him $2 million over 6 years to create false diagnoses. Alexandra fought the charges, but security footage from multiple states showed her delivering women back to abusive situations. She got 25 years. David took the stand against his lawyer's advice, still believing he could charm his way out. "These women were mentally ill," he insisted. "I tried to help them." The prosecutor pulled up the video from the bachelor party. David's drunk confession played for the jury. His face went pale as his own words condemned him. "That was taken out of context." "Then let's provide context," the prosecutor said. "Is this your signature on custody papers signed while Rachel was unconscious?" She was hysterical. "Is this your payment to Judge Hamilton for favorable rulings?" "That's not." "Is this your email instructing Alexandra to, quote, deliver the package, referring to your pregnant wife?" The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. 45 years to life. As they led David away, he turned to Rachel. "You've ruined everything." "No," Rachel replied calmly. "You ruined yourself. I just survived it." Outside the courthouse, media swarmed, but Rachel wasn't interested in interviews. She had a son to raise, a life to rebuild. Maya had set up a foundation, the Phoenix Project, helping women escape similar situations. Patricia became a counselor. Even Linda's family contributed, turning their grief into purpose. 6 months later, at the Foundation's first gala, Rachel stood before a room of supporters, her son on her hip. "They want us to be silent victims," she said, "to disappear into their false diagnoses and fabricated shame. But we are not victims. We are survivors. And our voices, together, are louder than their lies will ever be." The room erupted in applause. In the back, Sarah Mitchell watched with pride. The network that had operated in shadows now had legal backing, proper funding, and connections throughout law enforcement. But the evening's biggest surprise came when a woman approached Rachel afterward. Elderly, elegant, with knowing eyes. "I'm Elizabeth Winters," she said, "David's mother." Rachel tensed, but the woman raised a peaceful hand. "I'm here to apologize. I knew what my son was becoming. I saw the signs. I should have acted." She pulled out a checkbook. "This won't undo the harm, but I hope it helps others." The check was for $10 million. "Also," Elizabeth added quietly, "I've revised my will. Everything goes to my grandchildren, all 5 of them, from all 3 marriages. David gets nothing." 5 years had passed since the night Rachel knelt in the rain. She stood in the same spot now, though the house looked nothing like it had then. She'd bought it in the bankruptcy auction after David's assets were liquidated, not out of nostalgia, but for transformation. Where once stood a monument to control, now thrived a different kind of home. The Phoenix House, a transition shelter for women escaping abuse. The locked doors had been removed, replaced with open archways. The basement where David had planned his schemes was now a children's playroom. The master bedroom where Rachel had been imprisoned had become a communal library. "Mama, look!" Her son Timothy ran up holding a painting he'd made in the art therapy room. 5 years old now, with Rachel's kind eyes and, unfortunately, David's sharp intelligence, though channeled toward empathy rather than manipulation. "It's beautiful, baby," Rachel said, kneeling to his level. They'd had honest conversations about his father, age-appropriate but truthful. Timothy knew his dad had made bad choices and had to go away. Someday, she'd tell him more. Maya arrived with her own daughter, born through IVF, after she'd decided partnership meant something different than marriage. "The documentary crew is here." Rachel nodded. 3 years after the trial, she'd finally agreed to tell the full story. Not for sensation, but for education. The documentary, The Rain That Night, would premiere next month. Patricia walked through the garden, leading a group therapy session. She'd gotten her counseling degree at 58, proving it was never too late to rebuild. Her steady voice carried across the yard. "Trauma doesn't define you. Your survival does." Inside, Sarah, who'd left the force to run the Phoenix Foundation full-time, was training new advocates. Remember, when someone says their partner would never hurt them, that's often when they need the most help. The doorbell rang. Rachel opened it to find a young woman, maybe 25, with a black eye poorly hidden by makeup and a suitcase clutched in shaking hands. Is this the Phoenix house?" she whispered. "Yes," Rachel said gently. "You're safe here." The woman broke down crying. Rachel guided her inside, remembering her own desperate flight. But this woman wouldn't have to create elaborate escapes or fake her death. The systems Rachel had fought to change were changing, slowly but surely. Later that evening, after Timothy was asleep, Rachel sat in her office, once David's, video calling with legislators about the new domestic violence laws being proposed. The Winners Act, they called it, making financial abuse a federal crime and requiring real verification for psychiatric holds. Her phone buzzed, a notification from her lawyer. David had requested parole again, denied again. He'd serve at least 30 more years, and Timothy would be 35 before his father could even theoretically contact him. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine entered with tea and her latest report. "We've traced similar networks in 12 states, she said, all connected to wealthy men using the same playbook David pioneered." "Then we expand," Rachel decided. "Every state needs a Phoenix house." "That's a $100 million project." Rachel smiled. Elizabeth's estate was valued at $300 million. She passed last month. It all goes to the foundation and the children. Outside, rain began to fall. Not the violent storm of that horrible night, but a gentle spring shower. Rachel walked onto the covered porch, watching the water nourish the garden Patricia had planted. Mama, Timothy appeared in his dinosaur pajamas. Is the rain scary? Rachel lifted him onto her lap. No, baby. Rain helps things grow. Even storms, as frightening as they are, eventually pass. And look what grows after. She pointed to the garden where tomorrow sunflowers would open their faces to the sun, where women would gather for morning yoga, where children would play without fear. Her phone rang. Another woman needing help. Rachel passed Timothy to Maya and took the call. You're not alone, she said, the same words Sarah had once said to her. We'll get you out. As she talked through another escape plan, Rachel noticed the security camera that had once recorded her humiliation. She'd kept it, but changed its purpose. Now it recorded women arriving in desperation and leaving in strength. It witnessed children playing where violence once reigned. It captured the exact moment when someone realized they were finally free. The caller was crying now, but they were tears of relief. Tomorrow she'd be safe. Her children would be protected. The cycle would break. David had forced Rachel to kneel in the rain, thinking he was breaking her. Instead, he'd created his own destroyer, not through revenge or hatred, but through survival, justice, and the unbreakable bonds between women who refused to be silenced. The storm had passed. The phoenix had risen. And in houses across the country, women were learning they could rise too. In federal prison, David Winters sat in his cell watching the news. The documentary trailer played again. Rachel's voice strong and clear. He thought the rain would wash me away. He never understood. Rain makes things grow. The guard walked by. Lights out, Winters. David lay in the dark, finally understanding. He hadn't lost because Rachel had fought back. He'd lost the moment he'd mistaken gentleness for weakness, confused control with power. Real power, he now knew too late, was the ability to lift others up. Rachel had that power. He never would. 500 miles away, Rachel tucked her son into bed, checked on the 3 women staying at Phoenix House, and finally allowed herself a moment of complete peace. The rain continued falling, but she no longer heard it as a reminder of pain. Now it sounded like freedom. It sounded like hope. It sounded like home.